Hi guys, good morning. Something is funky and I can't see myself. There I am. Okay, so if I do it this way, there we go. Okay. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Middle school. I will see you guys next week on Zoom. Church, it sounds like is going to go back to in person on the 17th. So we got a couple more weeks where we'll be remote. And then hopefully everything's calm with COVID and we're able to get back in person. So today we're going to kick off a new series. This is called Moods. And kind of the whole point of this is really understanding this idea that these emotions and moods that we might get into don't have to control us, right? Through Jesus, we've got freedom and we don't need to be controlled by emotions. So each week we're going to talk about a different emotion and talk about how we can, learn from the Bible ways to better process it. So, today, before we really dive in, I want you to think of a time that you were just so mad or so frustrated, so angry that you couldn't really even respond, and you just reacted, like you just blew up, or you, threw a tantrum, whatever it might be. As we go through this, and I'm talking about this emotion of anger, you guys might be able to relate to some of these, and different ideas might come to mind. So, a couple illustrations I want to show you. Maybe there was a point where you studied really hard for a test and you were trying to get a really good score on it. It was really important that you do well on it. So you worked really hard. But when you got it back, it didn't have a good grade. It was like failing. Maybe you felt like this. I've definitely felt this way before. Or maybe there is a bully at your school who is picking on one of your friends, and no matter what you do or say, you can't, it keeps going, it's not stopping. And maybe you feel like you want to do this. You just want to explode, right? Or maybe you want to go to some event that your friends are doing, like maybe it's a party or everyone's hanging out, and your parents told you no. So maybe you would, at that point, you felt like you wanted to do this, right? So I think there's a lot of different situations where we feel really, really frustrated. And I think we can all say that we've all experienced these things. We've all experienced that feeling. One thing that I want you to really know as we're going through this, all these times in your life where you felt anger or you felt like extreme frustration, those emotions aren't bad. Like that anger is not bad. It's okay. But it can be really easy to take that anger and fall into the trap of letting it take over. And it can control you. And that's what we want to stay away from. So throughout this, anger is not bad. We'll talk about kind of the reasons that there can be good anger, but it's how we respond or react with that. So there are a couple different kinds of anger. First one I want to talk about is outward anger. So outward anger is the kind where it's really obvious, it comes out. This is when you're angry, so you lose your temper, or you yell, or you stomp, you slam doors, whatever it is. People around you know that you're angry. You punch something, you push your sibling. That's like outward anger. You also could have inward anger, and this is when you don't necessarily raise your voice, you don't explode, but people around you still know you're angry because the way that you just shut down. So maybe you go into your room, you don't talk to anyone. The silent treatment, that could be one too. This is all like inward anger. You just close people off. Some of us also might experience protective anger. And this one's tricky because it is anger for the right reasons. So it can end up being outward, where it's like an action, or it could also be inward, where it's like anger about something wrong or bad or evil or unfair that has happened to you or that you see outside in the world. You want to do something, you want someone to make it right, whatever that evil thing is. And there's actually been a lot of great things in history that have happened because of protective anger. So, if you guys know Greta Thunberg, she is a teenager, and she looked at the environment right now and how the world is treating the environment, and she was really upset about it. So she took action. She actually won the Nobel Peace Prize, which was cool. Malala, if you've ever heard of Malala, she was a young teenager in Afghanistan. She's older. I think she's in her 20s now. But as a teenager, she was advocating that girls should have the right to go to school. She wanted to go to school. Because she did that, the Taliban found her and shot her in the head. She managed to survive, which was amazing. And then she pretty much dedicated her life to advocating for girls around the world to have the right to be educated. So a lot of really wonderful things can be done because of that protective anger. Where somebody or something isn't getting what they deserve. And so there's like that response to it. So what's really important for us to understand again is that anger is not wrong. Okay. It's a very real emotion that you're feeling. And it's not a bad thing. What's bad is when it starts to control you or it begins to be the boss of you. That's when it has the potential to do more harm than good. So it's not a bad thing, but we just don't want it to control us. So what do we do to manage this mood? How do we control this anger, right? How do we kind of keep that under control? So today we're going to take a look at some answers from a guy named James. And James was actually the brother of Jesus. And so I think it's pretty obvious that he had a very close up relationship, personal look at the way that Jesus was living his life. James was writing to some Christians. We're going to read a passage. He was writing to some Christians who were spread out all around the region. And he was encouraging them to live out what they learned about following Jesus from Jesus himself. And so in this passage, he addressed something that I think can help us understand anger and how to respond with our anger. So James said, right here, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, that is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice." So breaking this down a little bit, James starts with the question of who is wise and understanding among you. You may have heard wise before. Wise is different than being smart. There's like quite a distinction between them. Being wise is something that happens when you've had a lot of experience. You take what you've experienced and you learn from it. So James is asking his audience to consider which of them was wise, which one of them was going to learn from the things that they'd experienced and be different going forward. So James started by saying that we can show we're wise in the way that we live, the way that we treat other people, the way we view other people, the things we do. And hang on just a second. Oops, sorry, that was weird. Those things will be a sign of wisdom. That's living in our hearts. But if we have things like bitterness, envy, selfishness, or anger in our hearts, then our actions and our words and our responses are going to show that instead. Any place in our heart that's filled with those things, that's where James said that we're going to find disorder and evil. And if we allow those, if we allow those things, let me go back to the verse. Oh my goodness, why can't I do this? There we go. Okay, sorry, that was strange. Having all sorts of tech issues today. So if we allow those things to exist in our heart, then they're going to come out in our lives in the form of anger, and that would have the potential to cause a lot of harm to others, which we don't want. So again, anger itself is not bad, but what we do with it could really be bad. When it comes to anger, we have a choice. We're always going to have reasons to get angry, but when we face that anger, we have to control how we respond to it. We can't just react and explode. We have to respond with wisdom, right? And we get to decide if we're going to let it be the boss of us or if we're going to react in a positive way. So I don't know about you, but I definitely do not want to be ruled by my anger. I want to be in control of that. So we're going to take a look at one more thing that James says right here. He says, "What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you?" James wants us to know that if we want to keep anger from being the boss of us, we have to understand where it comes from, right? We have to get down to the source, figure out where does it come from. According to James, the source of that anger comes from inside us. the evil desires at war within us, which kind of sounds dramatic, right? A little bit dramatic there. But our anger is basically what he's saying is that our anger is about not getting what we want, right? When we don't get what we want, that's where our anger comes from. It's about selfish or jealous or bitter feelings that that are fighting for space in our heart. And often it's about life not happening the way that we think it should happen. So maybe we think we should have been the one to get the lead in the play, or that our friends should have treated us better. We think our parents should listen to us and let us hang out with our friends whenever we want. Or maybe we feel like someone else doesn't get what we thought they deserved. We think our siblings should be punished for the things that they're doing. Just any of those things, like where we have this idea of how it should go. All of those feelings, they kind of build up, and that's where anger comes from. And what they want is control, right? Those emotions want control of us. We have this idea of how life is supposed to be. We want to be in control of the way that people act, the way that things happen around us, the way our life goes. So we want to be in control of all that. And that's something that I can really relate to. I like to have a lot of control, right? And I need to learn to let those things go. The way that life happens, we can be sure that our expectations and desires, like we have no idea if they'll like be perfectly met, right? And that isn't just the way it goes. Our desires aren't always going to be met. People aren't always going to act the way we think they should act. Life isn't always going to happen the way that we want it to happen. And when it doesn't, that can make us feel super angry. Angry at the people around us, or angry at our circumstances, angry at ourselves, maybe even angry at God. And as James said, these feelings can damage our relationships. They can lead to fights and quarrels. And if we're honest, they can lead to a lot of other negative things. So when we let our anger control what we do and what we say and how we act, it becomes the boss of us. But remember, what we really want to focus on with this series is that Jesus offers us a better way. He does not want us to have to be controlled by our emotions. And he offers a way for us to manage all of our feelings. Anger does not have to be the boss of you. Like, that's a very important thing to take away from this. So it's a really easy thing to say. But then, like, when you're angry, it doesn't really help, right? So there's a couple things that I think we can do to kind of start processing how to approach our anger. First, we can take a step back when we feel those emotions of anger bubbling up inside us, to kind of take a pause. And we don't need to react right away. We can choose to take a step back, and we cannot yell, not send that text message, not cut someone off. We can take control and just take a deep breath and kind of like process for a minute, right? So take a step back instead of reacting right away. Next, we can also be honest. So in order to understand our anger, we have to be really honest about where it's coming from. So like where it's really coming from. So trying to really process, what is it that is setting you off? Like, what is so frustrating about what that person said? What is making you angry? Maybe it's actually jealousy or fear or disappointment. Maybe it's grief or pain or frustration. Any of those not so great emotions. So taking a moment to try to name those, being honest about where it's actually coming from, can be a great step forward. So next time you find yourself angry, take a step back, pause, and then try to pinpoint where that anger is coming from. Then talk to God about the reasons for your anger. Invite him into that emotion that you're feeling. Ask him to help you process it. We don't need to keep our anger from God, because he can handle all sorts of feelings, and he wants to be there for us, and he wants us to be able to give those things to him. So if you feel like you are struggling to find the root of your anger, talking to someone about it can be really helpful too. Maybe one of your leaders at church, or maybe a parent, or a teacher, a counselor at school, probably an adult who can give you like a perspective that they might have from different experiences that they've had. So finding that trusted adult to help you kind of process through where that anger might be coming from. And then another piece is to own your part, right? This one's really hard because honestly, we'd rather be angry at someone than think that we had done something wrong. And as great as that feels sometimes, there's only one thing that we can control, which is ourselves. So if someone hurt us, but then we said something to try to hurt them back, um, then maybe something negative happened from that. If we did something in response, those things that we do, those things that we said, we have to own them. We need to take responsibility for those things. We need to apologize for those things, and then deal with our anger, right? So taking a step back, being honest about our feelings, and taking responsibility for how our anger made us react helps us to choose to be wise with our anger, choosing to look at what is going on inside of us and make changes going forward. And as we do all that, our anger loses its power to control us. It loses its ability to cause us to react or respond in a way that isn't healthy and can lead to negative consequences for us and for other people as well. So anger really loses the chance to be the boss of us. So remember, anger does not have to be the boss of you. This is the important point. You can be in control of how you respond when you're angry. And one of the things, as you are heading towards the questions, which are in the details below, as you're taking a look at those questions, one thing to think about is like, what is one thing that really makes you angry, right? So try to think about that thing. And again, taking a step back, processing and being honest about where that anger is coming from, and then owning your own responsibility from that as well. So anyway, that is this week. Check out the questions in the details below. You can journal your answers, or if you wanted to talk to a parent about them, that'd be a great way to process through these. And then we will see you at 7:30 on Tuesday for Bible study. We'll be on Zoom. And then we will be together for church next Sunday, the 10th at 9:30. We'll be on Zoom then. Okay. All right, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you soon on Zoom, and then hopefully very soon in person.